Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke. As crowned by one of my haters, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed already. I couldn't do this without you. I'm trying to get to 1,200 subscribers. Can I do it? Who knows? Last week, I made a video about San Diego Comic Con 2024 talking about the comments that Shooty and RTD were saying. I was openly critical of what Shooty was actually saying about his interpretation of the Doctor. I'm not going to be apologizing, by the way, because I stand by the criticism of what I've made of his comments. As an actress, I go to a lot of lengths to explore a character when I'm getting ready for that character and do as much research as I possibly can. So I know that the answers that Shooty was given weren't as deep for the amount of time that he's actually been playing the Doctor. They weren't as deep as they could have been. Simple. Now, as a content creator, I'm going to get criticism, of course. Some of that criticism can be out of context if you've not watched my past videos and say this one perhaps is your first video. However, I don't have any control over what people watch. So any criticism that comes by that's out of context will naturally happen, and that's absolutely fine. There have been some suggestions that I've blamed Shooty, and that's not what I should be doing. I should be blaming the writers. That's the criticism. Now, please don't go looking for these comments or say anything negative to those people in the reply of these comments, because at the end of the day, it's already by the by as it's prompted this video, and I actually think it will make for a great mini series for this channel on a Monday. I've been very fair to Shooty in my reviews of the episodes and highly critical of his comments to the fans outside of his performance of the show, things like touching grass and all of that. I keep the comments and the performances separate. I've not called for a miscast yet, as I was able to with Jodie, because the writing for this series and for his Doctor are so far removed from the show that I can't, as a professional actress, judge it fairly as of yet. And I don't think it would actually be fair for me to do so. It would also be incredibly hypocritical of me to blame Shooty when my favourite Doctor, Colin Baker, who was the sixth Doctor, was blamed for much less than what's happening with the show right now, especially after many years later, Big Finish, the audio drama company, proved it wasn't really anything to do with him at all. Now, I'm still waiting for that episode to make a fair judgment on Shooty in that regards. Maybe it will come with the Christmas episode. It's being written by Stephen Moffat. Who knows? I highly recommend watching my review of Shooty's series as the Doctor so far, so you can actually have a full grounding and understanding of my judgments of him. Now, as I've said already, I've been highly critical of the writing in my reviews, whilst being fair where it's needed. The comments I received about blaming the writers and not the star is something that I can look into separately as a mini-series on this channel, as I have just said earlier. Theoretically, I have done it already, but there's no reason why I can't actually consolidate it down. Let's look at Moffat, Chibnall, and the first three specials of RTD in this week's video. Then next week, I will do the Christmas special and series 1, or season 1 as it's now being called, and the following weeks we'll take a look at the quotes and ratings from RTD. Now, I'm bound to miss something out, of course. That's going to be natural because there is a lot to cover, so please comment below. Let's put it into perspective. Really, the shoddy writing and disregard for the canon began much earlier than RTD 2.0. If you want to be really picky, and I mean really picky, it started with Moffat, when there was a massive tonal shift with the show when Capaldi was introduced as the Doctor. It moved away from the overly energetic Doctors to a much darker tone, which in many respects I prefer instead of the goofiness that comes with RTD. That's not really anything new to Who overall, so to speak, particularly if you come from the classic era. But it was to New Who, and anyone who's not experienced classic Who, that could, of course, potentially put them off naturally. However, I wouldn't blame the darker tone for it personally. I would start with perhaps the muddling of the regeneration order and making it so that Matt Smith is the 12th Doctor because Tennant used another regeneration. Therefore, his doctor needs a new set of regenerations, which was absolutely pointless, in my opinion. Logically, the regeneration energy is expelled into the severed hand more for the purpose of getting Rose out of the story for good, because people wanted the relationship between the Doctor and Rose to evolve, essentially. And it was a fan service that doesn't actually need to change the linear of the Doctors whatsoever. This plot point of 10 using the 11th incarnation regeneration energy is actually overall disregarded when you're talking about the linear of the Doctors as it would appear within the canon, much like McGann being the half-human Doctor. It was disregarded. The Impossible Girl storyline, which had already been done with Donna Noble and regurgitated with Clara and to some extent Amy, RTD found a plot device for Series 4 in order to get Donna back, made the Impossible Girl storyline and the Impossible Family storyline, I guess you could say, it really worked. And it was a rare, extremely rare story in Doctor Who that was more companion-centric. Fans of the show loved the storyline, or most of them did, and so it became a reason to keep reigniting it, regurgitating it, reusing it, whatever word you want to use within the show. The only thing is, just because it's worked once before doesn't mean to say that it will work again, and it has become overdone. I would blame, though, the introduction of Missy being the true start to the unraveling of the canon. That was a massive regeneration plot shift, whilst in small points, it fits the Master as the master of disguise, so to speak, makes it the precipice for the biggest plot device shift that destroyed the regeneration canon as we knew it. You know what I'm talking about, right? The Doctor being female. The Doctor being female was a major shift in the show, and that's because Moffat set the ball rolling with Missy for Chibnall in order to be able to do it and justify it. They were clearly making it so they could have a female Doctor, which, in my opinion, this is my opinion, it's redundant because there were already other female time ladies that hadn't been explored in New Who, but we knew it existed from classic. Romana being one of them, and Rani being the other, as the two sort of main ones, I guess you could say. Both of which actually Jodie, in my opinion, would have been great as, particularly as the Rani. However, Rani always throws some questions around, particularly with what's going on with the Mrs. Flood at the moment, because Pip and Jane Baker, who introduced the Rani, never gave the rights over before they passed away. They didn't have any children, so there's reason to believe that the estate actually now have the rights. So we'll have to work that one out, I guess, over time. Now, a friend of mine once said, "Yes, it's about time we had a female doctor." And I said, "What's the point in having a female doctor? There's already female time ladies that have been used. Why can't we just use one of them?" Chibnall the Destroyer was the one who really started to take it for granted and mess with the hard canon. Yes, okay, he brings the Master back as a man, which is good. Yes, there were definitely stories that made it easier for me to judge Jodie's portrayal because it still sounded doctorish and call it a miscast. But when the running order, and by this I mean my canon that doesn't include the War Doctor, who is great by the way, goes from Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee, T. Baker, Davison, C. Baker, McCoy, McGann, Eccleston, Tennant, Smith, and Capaldi to a free-for-all with the Timeless Children, you destroy the hard canon and the majority of the fandom leave. The irrationality behind the flux is something to be desired. Turning the Time Lords into Cybermen was a massive downer, and catering to a small group of the fandom to suggest attraction between Yaz and the Doctor was so jarring. And by jarring, I mean because there was no natural build-up to it. To even suggest it, it came completely left field. And just before I get the Rachel, the Doctor, and Rose, The Doctor and Rogue comments, I will say no. The whole love storyline doesn't work in Doctor Who. It's because he can never say to a human that he loves them. And that's all to do with lifespan. There's mortality behind it. That's why we never hear it from him when he leaves Rose, and we never even hear the Metacrisis doctor say it either. There is a reason for it. So the series under Chibnall, the destroyer gets into hot water and it's facing cancellation because of all of this. And to Disney, the DEI wanted to invest money into the series whilst attaining the rights to Bluey. They were not supposed to be having a say in this overall, according to reports. Although it's safe to say, especially in my opinion, any company who puts money into something will be having some kind of say in it. They bring back Russell T Davies, who was well known at the time for the success of bringing back Doctor Who in 2005. Whilst the fans never asked for him to come back, fans were excited because there was a chance that the show would be saved under his reign. He was supposed to be staying for 3 specials alongside David Tennant and Catherine Tate, but we all know how that panned out. Now, RTD really had the opportunity here to do a hard reboot, disregard everything Chibnall the Destroyer had done, but oh no. RTD became Russell T Davies the Mega Destroyer. He solidified what his bestie Chibs the Destroyer did and carried on. He regenerates Whittaker into Tennant. He makes a point of making sure the clothes regenerate too because of his issues with Tennant wearing Jodie's clothing. It's a bit off to me, but I accepted it because, well, maybe he was right in that case. I'll be coming back later to this as I want to address something else he also said about some stuff. Now, I know I'm not focusing on quotes, but I have this quote here from the San Diego Comic-Con 2024. And it says, Davis responds to a question that was asked about the show. I don't go online much. Maybe I should. Maybe that's wrong. I'm talking about Twitter or X as the online portal. I don't feel particularly safe as a gay man. Increasingly, I think that it's worse and worse in society. I see what's said out there, but that's a long discussion for another time, but I'm not sure I can even be part of that. So that's tricky. So that stops me going online in many ways, even though he's terminally on Instagram. We spent a whole life on that. He continued, so I get my agent telling me what's going on. I get people kind of here inevitably. There's a kind of osmosis about the culture war or whatever kind creep through. To be honest, in terms of online activity, I'm much more interested in what's happening, which is a bit contradictory. Okay, but carrying on. He then addressed Doctor Who. I think Doctor Who's fine. I think there are things happening in the culture wars, particularly with trans rights these days, that are a million times more important than what's happening with Doctor Who. He continued, it's getting worse. It's terrifying. The crimes of Russell T Davies, the Mega Destroyer, are major ones. Let's have a look at them, starting off with the Star Beast. Let's take a quick look at Rose. Timeline-wise, the age of Rose is incorrect. She wouldn't be 15 years old here. At most, she'd be 10, maybe 12 years old maximum. The reason why she was aged up was because RTD wanted a trans character to be in the story. Now, within itself, I don't care about trans characters being in the show. Most trans people just want to exist, so therefore integrate them naturally. That's absolutely fine. Haven't got an issue with it. But in this case, it's an issue for contention because of the age of the character. She was aged up because it's illegal to transition a child here in the UK. Legal medical transition here in the UK is 18. Yasmin Finney, who played her, was also 18 at the time. It would have looked bad on the BBC and RTT had they had a trans child. Whilst I'm set against transitioning children so early on in life, I understand why they aged up the character. Now, does it make it great? Absolutely not. It would have perhaps been better if they had gone further into the future, so to speak, But RTD doesn't think like that for a show that's about time travel. He should have made Rose 18 instead, so she is an adult and able to make the decision for herself. The representation of a child or teenage trans character that is on the screen should be in Soapland, as Doctor Who isn't actually a soap, but to me, it certainly developed a bit of a soapbox in general this series. The scene with the pronouns was so unbelievably jarring. It came out of nowhere, and no, it's not a natural way of talking. It's actually very rude. I've said it before. If you want to add pronouns, and I mean really add them, if you want to go down that route, then don't jar or convolute the plot for the sake of 15 seconds of dialogue that turns people off, that never gets followed through on. That also happened later on with the Devil's Chord. RTD did the pronoun bit with the maestro, and then maestro was never referred to again with they them pronouns at all in the entire episode. If you're going to do it, then be consistent and work it into the script naturally so people don't notice the shift in writing. Now, one of the things that was a reason for all the excitement around Tennant and Tate returning was how the meta crisis was going to be resolved. What I would have liked to have seen was this taking 3 episodes to resolve instead of 5 seconds, or better still, having Donna die from it. Instead, we got Donna briefly dying from it and then coming back to life. Then all this nonsense about Rose resolving the situation because of not being on the binary. And then total emasculation of the Doctor, who had to stand there and just take it. If Donna and Rose could really just have let it go, then surely it could have been resolved much sooner, and the Donna would have been able to continue her travels with the Doctor. It was a shoddy and quick resolution, and the Doctor should have been the one to resolve it, and not the companions. But by this point, RTD was getting ready to rewrite the character of the Doctor anyway, which we witness at the beginning of Wild Blue Yonder, which, by the way, is an absolutely atrocious episode, in my opinion. A race swapped Isaac Newton. I can hear people saying, Rachel, it's just entertainment. It doesn't matter. No, disagree. It does matter. That was just a diversity hire because they were not planning on having Rose or Sean in at the end, because Bernard Cribbins was going to be there on his own. And we know we all love Wilf. And there has to be a diverse character in the episode due to DEI representation and ruling. There would have been plenty of historical Indian characters to have had in it that could have been chosen from, but they decided to race swap Isaac Newton. You can call the multiverse because of the Whoniverse if you would like to. That's absolutely fine, but you can't deny that if we had a white Rosa Parks back in the Chibnall, the Destroyer era, then there would have been an absolute uproar. The asexual Doctor suddenly implying that he's into men? That's not foreshadowing anything, is it? And in general, the Wild Blue Yonder episode had some of the worst CGI in the specials. It was a very weak episode in the terms of sci-fi, and the ending was so anticlimactic. The Doctor notices immediately that he's picked up the wrong Donna. It would have been much more interesting had he left the real Donna behind. Now, the giggle, for the most part, was fine right up until the Doctor gets shot and starts regenerating, or so we think. Instead, he bigenerates. He splits off into 2, and it undoes the entire regeneration canon. You remember I said earlier about RTD not wanting to have Tennant regenerate with Jodie's clothes on because he had issues surrounding it. He seemed okay here, though, with this. He was quite happy for a young man to be running around in a shirt, underwear, and shoes. Interesting. Surely the Doctor would bigenerate with duplicate clothing? Or is there another reason for this? Now, that aside, was there also an issue with a white man regenerating into a black man? When Moffat was writing, he didn't seem to have an issue with it when the Doctor shot the General and he regenerates from a white man into a black woman, as if it was something the Time Lords did all the time. Mind you, I don't think the diverse team at Bad Wolf would think about that right now. Now let's address the biogeneration. That was a dirty on shooty. No matter what you think of his portrayal, it was not clean. The tenant doctor should have died and regenerated cleanly into the 15th doctor. By making him biogenerate would suggest that you want to micromanage what's going on, as you know that the Doctor Who lifeline could potentially fizzle out. And your safe bet is David Tennant as a very popular doctor. Or he was a very popular doctor. RTD clearly knows that this current incarnation may fail, and that's because of what he's writing and planning. Current ratings are reflecting it, but that's a whole other episode. They defeat the Toymaker with a ball, which in itself is boring, especially when we know that the Celestial Toymaker, if you've watched Classic that is, was defeated last time through a much more complicated puzzle. The Toymaker in this case was defeated outside of his domain, locked back into his box, and placed under salt. We see the Doctor and Donna in peril because when they enter the Toymaker's world, the Toymaker is the one in control. They coax him outside of it and are able to win. So why is it then that the 15th Doctor can get a giant hammer and make another TARDIS? He says because the Toymaker's domain still being around, but the Toymaker was defeated outside of his domain, where the rules do not apply and never have. The duplicate TARDIS can only occur in the realm of the Toymaker. The reason why this was done was because there seems to be little faith in Doctor Who currently. The timey-wimey duplicate TARDIS and having all the Doctors biogenerate has made it so that they can all return. The result of this biogeneration has essentially removed the sense of peril that the Doctor was facing. The Timeless Child kind of did that anyway, but what the biogeneration does is reinforce it. It also creates numerous plot holes, and the fans can just simply say about another Doctor coming in to help. Easy, problem solved. So, well, there you go. I've briefly, in this episode, covered Moffat, Chibnall, The Destroyer, and the first 3 episodes of the new Russell T Davies Mega Destroyer series. Next week, I'll cover the Christmas special and the entirety of Series 1 before moving on to the quotes and ratings. Now, let me know what you think. Chat about it, don't shout about it. Thanks very much for watching. I'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. with another video. Bye-bye.